Hey everyone, it's Foxx from modelmakingguru.com here, and welcome back to part 2 of our build of the HGUC Geara Zulu guards type. Right, now in the last episode you'll remember that I had started doing the stickers. I have now done all the kit stickers, with some exceptions. You can see here we've got the piping on these parts, we've got these little sort of white hook parts here, and bits of piping on here. There's some other bits as well, but I'm not going to show you all of it. There's not many of them. I'll put the thing on the shield as well. There you go. Now I have to say, as much as I may shout about stickers, I actually had a really good fun time doing this. I'm actually having more fun with this build than I am with ones that I fully paint and weather. So I think sometimes it's nice just to do a very, very basic absolute beginner's build, which is what this video is. So it's just quite relaxing. So we've got all these stickers on using all the techniques that I showed in the last video. I did add to the mix the pencil eraser. When I was rubbing the stickers down with the Q-tip or cotton bud, I decided as well to use the pencil eraser for some of the bigger, flatter stickers. And it's a good way just to very gently rub it down so it gets into all the little grooves. And it's quite handy. It can dislodge some of these stripy ones, so just be careful when you do it. You'll note that I haven't done things like the stickers that go on these parts. I haven't put stickers on those little thrusters or on these. There's a whole raft of little circular stickers that go on the thrusters. I've not put those on because we're going to paint those. We're going to be painting them with that metallic colour that I showed you in the first episode, and it's only really minimal painting, and you'll be fine. Even as an absolute beginner, you'll be absolutely fine, because I have a magical technique, which means no matter how candid you get painting something like that, you can still bring it back to looking nice and crisp and neat. So I have a magical technique that I will show you. One other thing you might notice as well, I've got the seam line here. This leg is two halves, left and right. Thankfully everything slots into the top, so I can assemble this bit to do this sticker which goes over the middle. There's a seam line down there. Now, those of you who are more advanced will know about the technique of putting glue down the middle, squishing it together and sanding it back to get rid of the seam line. That's a technique I have used before, but what I have found myself personally is it's a bit more of an advanced technique, and it works brilliantly on white plastic. It doesn't always work so well on coloured plastic, because what you have is sometimes, the idea is, for those of you who don't know, before you put the two parts together, you put some very thin cement, like Tamiya extra thin, on each side of this seam. You give it a second, you squash it together, and the glue will bubble out of the seam. But what the glue like Tamiya extra thin does is it melts the plastic and welds it together. So when you squish it together and it all bubbles out, what's actually bubbling out is melted plastic. So effectively you're filling the seam with melted plastic. Then you would just sand it back very gently, and you get everything down to a flat level, and you'd have no seam left. On white it works perfectly. On colour plastic sometimes you get a bit where there's no actual melted plastic, just a little blob of glue. So when you sand that back, you get plastic, 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 and then a clear spot where it's just glue and there's no melted plastic. There's no way to fix that if you're not painting your kit. So I plumped it for safety, and I just left it as a seam line. Now, it's not actually so bad. You can't really see it in real life. Once this thing is stood up, I mean, you can't see it now, but I'm looking at it now, and with the shade and the shadow, I can't see that seam line. Bandai are very, very good at minimising their seam lines where they absolutely have to. Now, you will get you'll get more seam lines in, say, an HG kit than you will in a master grade or some other kits, but they're fairly minimal, and I can live with that. For the sake of this build, I didn't want to go that advanced anyway, because that's more of an advanced technique. That's more skill level 1 and up. I think I actually showed it in my skill level 1 build. Remember, this is an absolute beginner build. So what is the next step? Next step is actually something that's not part of this build. You'll see here on this leg, see there, see there, and also see there. These aren't part of this kit. These are dry rub transfers, and I actually took them from leftover sticker and dry rub transfer sheets from some of my older builds. The Master Grade Wing Gundam, I think for those, the Master Grade Heavy Arms, and I've also got a big sheet, which you can't see because of the white balance, for the Master Grade Full Armor Unicorn, which I'm never going to use because I tend not to use dry rubs. I tend to use water slides, and when you get water slides for any kit dry rubs and stickers, they tend to have them all in. I just find water slides easier. However, I thought it'd be fun to sort of tart this mobile suit up a little bit with some extras. Now I know I'm putting Federation Gundam stickers on a Xeon suit, but you know what? I don't care. Gunpla is freedom. So I've just added some little details. I've done some on the other leg. I'm going to put just some here and there, little markings. This is from the Master Grade Full Armour Unicorn, and this is the sheet of dry rubs. There's also a sheet of stickers about twice as big as this. These are all the little white warning markers, because it was a version CAC kit which come with millions of markings. These just go all over the Unicorn Gundam. Now, I've not used these, and these are all spares now, and one thing I will always say is, as you build more and more Gunpla, even if you don't want to use stickers and dry rubs and the foil stickers, keep them. Keep them to one side, even if you use water slides instead, because they will come in handy. So you can see here we've got lots of little markings everywhere. And some of them are just little things like little warning marks. I might say, caution, make sure this is inserted the right way, or, you know, warning, blast zone, and things like that. Little bits where it's marked off. Some of these things here are quite cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some of these on our Geara Zulu. I've also got the ones from the wing, from Heavy Arms, which I've got, you can see there, that's the one I used on, is that the one I used on the foot? No, it might have been, no, not that one. Was it off the Wing Gundam? I can't remember. Anyway, I've got another, there you are, it's that one there. And we also have from the Wing Gundam, these are smaller sets. So what we're going to do is I'm going to be adding not millions, but a few of these. So what I'm going to show you, although it's not part of this kit, if you've had other Gunpla and they've got dry rubs that you never used, I'm going to show you how to do dry rubs. Now, it's very simple, a little bit fiddly, but it's not complicated. You will need your dry rubs. You will need some clear sellotape, not masking tape, clear sellotape, a knife, and a pair of tweezers. Very fine. If you've got some fine tweezers, brilliant. If not, don't worry. Okay, so dry rub transfers. The way you apply these, you don't use water and you don't stick them on. You basically put them on the surface and rub on them, and they will adhere to the surface. They have this paper backing, this onion skin backing, which you must keep behind at all times. This side is shiny and is just clear plastic. The reverse side, you can see it's slightly frosted. The reverse side actually has an adhesive medium on it. So you need to make sure when you're cutting these out and working with them, you keep it on that backing at all times. Otherwise, you just end up sticking it to whatever it's laying on top of. So if I cut one out and stuck it on the desk and touched it, it might stick to the desk. So, but the advantage of dry rubs is you don't have a carrier film. There's no clear film, so you don't have an edge to them. It's just whatever's printed on it. So what we're going to do, we're going to put a decal or a dry rub here. Just like a warning thing. This is all going to be thrusters. So we're going to put a little thing here as if it's saying, warning, there's a whole load of really hot jet exhaust coming out, so don't put your face into the back of the vernier. You know what military types are like, it's all health and safety. So let me go and get this ready and we'll show you how to put these on. Back in a moment. Okay, right, so we are going to apply the sticker to here. There's going to be a warning marking of some sort, so what I'm going to use is I'm going to use one of these. These are actually for weapons, but I don't care, this is just fun. So the first thing you do, again, remember, always keep this on the onion skin paper. The other reason I forgot to mention why you keep it on the onion skin paper and don't just lie it on your desk is so you don't get crud and dust and dirt on the back of the film, because like I said, it's got a slightly adhesive surface and it'll just pick up fingerprints and dirt and dust, and then it'll just, when you put it on the model, you'll transfer that underneath the marking and it'll look terrible. So always keep it on the onion skin. So take your sharp blade. Again, if you're very young, be very, very careful, or if you're very young, maybe get your adult helper to do this for you. So I'm not going to press down on this too hard because with this hand, because I don't want to press down on the decals, they're dry rubs. So take your blade and you're just going to cut around the one you want. Try and go as close as you can, and you don't have to be super tough, you don't have to put a lot of pressure on, just take your time. Also, make sure you're in shot, yes. Where are you? There you are. So I want this one, so I'm just going to go around. Try and get as close as you can. There's no actual edge to this when you take it off. It's just to make the handling of it a bit easier when you're trying to stick it on the surface, because you're going to be working in a restricted space. So let's just put my finger over it to keep it in place. Okay, that now loose. It's still stuck in a corner here somewhere. How are we doing? Right, that's off. So I'm going to keep it on there just for a moment. Again, I'm keeping the main sheet on the onion skin. So we have our backpack. I'll change the white balance in a second. Now what I need to do is be really cunning about this. I need to get this piece onto a piece of tape, but I need some onion skin paper. So what I'm actually going to do is very carefully use the onion skin from one of my other sticker sets. Now you could just move this up a little bit and stick it on there, but you'll see why in a moment. So I'm going to take my little piece here, my little sticker. It's very important to keep an eye on which side is the plastic side and which side is the adhesive side. So I'm going to put that onto this piece of onion skin. And you can see there it's sticking to the tweezers because as I said, it's slightly adhesive. So let me just move this out of the way. Again, be very careful, keep it on the onion skin. Now, there's our little back pack. I'm going to change the white balance so you can see. This will look really bright now. Now what we need to do, we need to transfer this to this. Now if you just put it on the surface and start rubbing it, it's just going to fall off. So this is where your tape comes in. Take yourself a piece of the clear adhesive tape. Sellotape to most people, but it may have other names. Again, not masking tape, clear adhesive tape. Doesn't matter who makes it or what it is. Also, try not to get tape in your teeth, and when you blow your teeth to get the tape out, don't blow your decal away. Now I'm not resting this on the table and cutting it, because again I don't want to get gunk on it. So what we do, it's very simple. Take our piece of clear tape and just gently touch it to the decal. I'll try and get an edge near the edge. There. Our sticker is now on the tape. Let's get this out of the way. So we have our dry rub transfer on our sheet. On our tape. So I'm going to take the piece. Now this is where it gets difficult, because you want to line it up, but of course you've got this big piece of clear plastic which your eye will naturally tend to assume is on the edge. So all you do is lay it down on the edge. Now I'm going to have to pull this away from the camera so I can actually see, but all I'm going to do, apart from knocking the camera, is just stick this down so it's lined up. Now I'm going to have to move this away, so give me 1 second just so I can see. I do apologise. It is difficult because you can't really see where the edge of the piece is so easy. If I move it around in the light, I can kind of see through the clear plastic backing film a bit better. So I'm just going to try and finagle that around a bit. But yeah, your eye will naturally tend to look at the edge of the tape or the edge of the clear backing plastic as a point of reference to the edge of the model. So sometimes if you hold it up to areas so you can get the part in shadow, I think that will do. I don't think it's perfectly straight, but it's near enough. So I've not stuck it down harsh, just gently. Right, so that's in place. I need one other tool that I forgot to mention, and pencil. Now you can use anything that's got a soft, you could use the back of the pencil, you could use the front of the pencil. So you're going to take your pencil and just gently, you're going to rub over this transfer. That's why it's called a dry rub transfer. Now a darker pencil might be actually not as good, because you're going to you'll cover it over, then you won't see. What you'll see is, as you like this white square here, and it might not come out on camera, as you rub over it, it will start to fade a little bit. That's because it's adhering to the plastic and pulling away from the plastic backing. It will sort of change, not colour, but you'll learn to judge when it's detached from the backing. If you're not sure, just rub it more. And you see now why you need the tape, because the tape holds it in place. Now I normally dread doing these things on most kits, because Bandai, sometimes like with that full armor unicorn, they give you millions of them. And I dread doing them just because this is a long drawn out process sometimes. On a kit like that full armor unicorn, where there's like about 140 of these things, it'd take you weeks. Which wouldn't be a problem, it can be quite relaxing. But there is a certain amount of hit and miss in lining these things up. Like you see, I had to look close, and because you've got the edge of the plastic here, and you've got the edge of this tape, and you're trying to line it up to an edge like here on this plastic, and you want to line it up with the edge of the sticker, but you can't see through the plastic. So you can get hit and miss, and once these things are on, if it's on there, you can't move it around. You can remove it with more tape, but once it's on, it's not like a water slide where you can position it and move it around. So And you'll see it even in professional models where they use dry rubs. There's always going to be at least one where it's not quite straight, or it's not quite flush, or it's a bit wonky. There's nothing you can do about that. You're limited by the technique and the plastic. So that should be fine. So what do you do now? You don't just yank the tape off. That should all be transferred to the plastic. So what you do is very gently, and then pull it back on itself. Don't pull it up. Pull the tape back on itself and go slowly, because what you'll find is if anything hasn't stuck, you'll see it not being stuck, and then you can put it back down again. So if you pull away and you suddenly find half of this is still on the tape, just very carefully put it back down again and rub it some more. So peel it back slowly, and you should find we now have a dry rub transfer. Yeah, it's a little bit off to the side. I think I got it just about straight almost. It's not quite horizontal and it's a little bit off to the side, but you know, that's the limitation of dry rubs. You can't always see perfectly. So now we've got that in the middle of the backpack. That's perfect. I like that. That's dry rubs. I'll just go off and do a few more now, here and there. Little warning markings and caution markings, and that'll do us fine. It just add a bit more life to the mobile suit, make it look a little less basic. Okay, right, so all the panel lining is done. All the stickers and dry rubs are done. Time to just pick out a few details with different methods. First one we're going to use is the Sharpie method. As I said before, I picked up some metallic Sharpies. I have gold, bronze and silver. So what I'm going to do is just do some accent points. Now these are parts for the joints. These are the arm joints, and these parts here are for the legs. Yeah, there's two other parts that go on this, but it's about as complicated as it gets. So what I want to do is, I think I want to paint these a silver colour, and perhaps we'll do it, maybe I want to paint them a bronze colour. I quite like the bronze colour. So I'm going to do a bronze colour. These, as I'm pinning bits everywhere, I think I want to do like a, I don't know, maybe a silver colour on this part here, on the top of that cover piston cap. So I'm going to get my, what's that one? Gold, I want gold. Let's have bronze. Bronze is a nice colour. So I've got my my bronze Sharpie, and this couldn't be simpler. Now you can hold this in your hand. I'm going to use some of my little alligator clip things just for ease of gripping, and it couldn't be simpler. Now the only bit you're going to see is this edge, really. You might see a little bit of the edge there, but so this is literally all I'm going to do. I'm just going to colour it. Let's just make sure it's in focus. Just going to colour it mit the brush. And this is as hard as it gets. Now the one thing I found with these pens that's better than the Gundam markers, apart from the fact these are metallics, I think you can get metallic Gundam markers. The one thing I found better with these pens is that the paint is thicker and less runny. So it's a lot easier to control and work to edges. With the Gundam markers I've found, the actual Gundam markers themselves I've found, you touch the tip of the brush to the piece of plastic and it just goes everywhere. So fine detailing is not really an option with Gundam markers. Not the fat ones anyway. Now it may be a little bit streaky at first, but that's not the end of the world. Bear in mind, once this is finished, it's going to get a blast of matte varnish anyway. I'll do the edges. Now the good thing with it, because it's a stiff nib, you can do it horizontal to the edge and just hit the edges like this. So I'm not really thinking, just slapping it on, and you get nice edge definition. The stick's going to start getting in the way in a minute. So I'm just putting this on, just because I think you might see a bit of the edge. And the other thing I found with these markers is that's a brilliant metallic colour. That's better than, obviously it's a bit streaky, but that's better than a big chunk of the metallic paints I've got. Now there's a bit under there where the little stalk is, so when that's dried in a few minutes I'll have to go back and paint that bit, and I might have to go over it a little bit again just to get rid of some of these streaks. So let's put that to one side. Now let's have a look. I want to do some silver on the knees. Now you can see here I've already panel lined this, but that's not a problem because I can always go over it again later with the panel lining. So same technique as before, keep the brush not perfectly flush, but flat to the surface, and just go in. And I'm pushing it over the edge that way. That way it can kind of, as best as possible, guarantee I'm not going to go down onto the sides. And you can see here I'm not being particularly careful or thoughtful. And there we go. And that's pretty neat around the edges. It's a little bit crumply around the edge, but it's not the end of the world. There'll be some, I'll be able to put some weathering or something dry brushing on this anyway. So I'll do another one. And again, I'm not thinking, just keep the brush, I'm not doing it like this, because that'll just mean I'll slip and go down the side. Keeping it as much parallel with the surface, and just, I'm not using the point, I'm using like the edge of the brush, or the middle of the nib. Now like I said, it is a bit streaky, but one thing you want to do, or avoid, if you just put a layer of this paint down, then go straight over with the pen again, too much, you're just going to make streaks and dig into the layer of paint and make streaks, and then have visible streaks where you can see a shadow. So you want to avoid that. So let it dry for a few minutes first, and then go in. So I've got to tell you, I know I've just done it all off to the side there, my apologies. Got to tell you, that's the quickest bit of detailing painting I've ever done. Okay, now we're on to the next stage, which is the painting. Now don't be scared, this is easier than it looks. There's two things we need to paint. Little details, like you can see here I've started on these thrusters, and on the sides there. And we've got little thrusters on the arms, and we've got these bits on the shoulder things, and we have these parts on the ammo clips. Now these are white, you get stickers for these, but the stickers are pretty terrible, and they've got little nips in them to make them bend around the corners, and they look awful. So yeah, we're not going to be doing that. And we also have the thrusters. Now I've painted all the thrusters, this is just one left over. So what I'm going to do first is get the thruster done. Now I'm using, like I said before, AMIG steel, AMIG 191. Any silver metallic paint will do. You could do this with the Sharpies, but for these I want it, well, there's two reasons I want to use paint here. One, for the thrusters, I want it to be a nice smooth finish, or smoother than a pen can do, because you do get a little bit of streakies with the pens, although the metallic sheen that the pens give is actually better than this. But I also want to, on these parts, really control where it goes very carefully, and things like the thrusters. Now you will make goofs and you will make slip-ups, and I'm going to show you how to fix that if you do. So first thing to do, I'm just going to shake the paint. Now whichever paint you're using, if it's like a little bottle with a ball in it, give it a good shake. If it's say a Tamiya or a Mr. Colour or something like that, Gunsei Sanyo, just make sure you give it a good stir. So I'm going to get a little bit of paint. This is all old paint, by the way. A little bit of paint on my little palette. Anything can be a palette. Now for the verniers or the thrusters, I'm going to use a reasonably big brush. You don't want to use a small brush. If you use a small brush to paint a large area, you'll get lots of streaks and things. And when you're painting with these, if you go over paint you've already painted, you will ruck up the paint and make drag marks. So for the thrusters, it's going to be 2 coats. Let's get this painted. So take your bigger brush. Not too much paint, not a lot. I'm going to do the inside first, so we're just going to go in and get this bit done. I'm not being careful. Again, this is going to take more than 1 coat. The first coat will be a little bit patchy and streaky, but that's absolutely fine. And I realise this is all in shadow for you now, isn't it? Brilliant. Okay, so that'll do for the inside. For the outside, a little bit of paint, and we're just going to smoothly run the brush along. Now again, like I say, it'll probably look a bit rubbish at first, but don't worry, that's fine. Because you're painting on bare plastic, the paint will tend to not want to grip it too much, so it may be a bit streaky at first. But that's fine. Like there I've got lots of streak marks. I'm not too fussed. I don't really want to go over it again too much, because while the paint is still wet, it's alright. But as soon as that starts to dry and you get skin developing, then brushing over it will ruck it up and make nasty marks. I need to put that to one side to dry. I'm going to clean off my brush. Now if you've never painted before, to clean your brush, very simple. Get yourself a bit of tissue, and what you want to do is get some of the thinner that you use to thin the paints. You can get thinners from most brands. Put some of it to one side in a container, or in this case I've got an old pot of thinner with thinner in it. Get it in the thinner, get your tissue, and just put the brush in and just twist it like this. You don't want to pull, because if you pull and twist or pull the bristles, you just pull the bristles out. So you want to put it down and just twist it. And that is how you clean your paintbrush. Now I say the easiest thing I've found is to just get some thinner in a container, and it's normal paint thinner that you'd use, so acrylic paint thinner for acrylic paints obviously. Just have that to one side, and I always have that in there ready, and that's never been cleaned out or emptied. I've had that for about 3 years now, and it's now black, but hey, it's all gravy. Now for small details, let's try some small details. So this is going to get a bit harder for me to paint now. For small details, you're going to use the finest brush, or not the finest brush you can find. Now I'm using the Citadel brushes. Now there is one smaller than this, but like I said before, the smaller the brush, the smaller area you want to paint. Now if you've got a tiny area, you want a tiny brush because you can really control where the paint goes. But if you use a small brush on a reasonably sized area, something like this, you may get marks and streak marks. So sometimes for painting small parts like this, it's better to use a slightly bigger brush. Now I can't really explain that any better. It's kind of innate knowledge you'll develop over the years, but you'll develop it, don't worry. You'll just learn how paints work. Now metallic paints are brilliant because when you use metallic paints, they just flow much nicer than normal colours. So I want to colour this part here. I'll probably find the paint naturally goes to the edges. So let's see how we do. Where's my paint? Get a little bit of paint, not a lot, just a little bit. And very gently, I'm just going to touch it to the area I want to paint. And with metallics, like I say, you'll find you have a much easier time of controlling where that paint goes. Now, oops, I got some paint on the outside there. Oops, I got some paint on here. Oh no, I've written my entire model. No, I haven't. I'm going to show you a very easy method for cleaning that up. So I'm going to need to leave that to dry for 5 or 10 minutes. Because these are acrylic paints, they're water-based, or in this case alcohol-based, but same principle. So they will dry fairly quickly within minutes. Now for these parts, same again, exactly the same again. I just want to go over the top. Slight bit with the pen, you want to go not at that angle, but at this angle. And just run the paint over the top. And you will find if you use slow movements, because it's a metallic paint, it will behave very nicely for you. Now, I'm not going to go over that bit I've missed there again because the paint's now starting to dry, so I'm going to move on to the next one. And just gently touch it in. I'm hardly pressing the brush down at all here. I'm just about touching the paint to the surface and leaving it at that, letting the paint flow where it will go. Now note as well, I'm not being careful and going down to the bottom of the edges of these things. You don't have to, and I'll show you why later when we use a pin wash. You can do if you want to, if you think you've got the steady enough hands or the good enough vision. There's nothing stopping you doing that at all. But when we do a pin wash later on, you'll see how rough edges can be sort of hidden. This should be a bit more dry now, so I can go over very gently. Just very carefully, very slowly, letting the paint go where it wants to go. And if you're careful, the brush can maybe fold over the edge a little bit and run down the side, and that's where you'll get the edges. So that's that. Now it's not perfect. That bit there needs touching up. Like I said before, painting onto bare plastic does pose its own issues in that the plastic surface is shiny. so the paint doesn't want to flow as it normally would all the time. So that's that, those done. So I'm going to let these dry for a few minutes, and then when they've dried for a minute, I'll show you how to clean that up. So let's go and let this dry, and we'll be back in a moment. Alright, so a little bit of time has passed, and you can see now I've painted all kinds of things the silver colour with the paint. Got the thrusters on the feet, got the things on the ammo, we've got those little hooks on the torso. Now look at that there, that's messy, that's not a problem. Little bits on that gun handle, parts on the he-hawk, and various other bits and bobs with the little thrusters on the back skirt as well. So we're using the same technique. Now I said I'd show you how to clean this stuff up. Oh, I did the rifle as well. Put some little accents on there. So I showed you how I was intended to clean this thing up, and I shall. And I will tell you now, it is really, really easy. You will need one thing, and that is a cocktail stick. What do? Well, there's no real way for me to make this any more complex than it actually is. Let's just zoom in a little bit. Let's see if I can zoom in. There's no way for me to make this complicated. So here it is. Get your cocktail stick, get it about that kind of angle to the surface, not straight down, and just gently rub the paint off. Now, like I said before, because these are acrylic and therefore either water or alcohol based, they don't particularly want to stick to the surface that much. They're not that keen on adhering to the bare plastic. If this had been primered and painted, this wouldn't work. But because it's just paint on plastic, it doesn't want to grip so much. So it's very easy to take it off. And there you can see we have now a nice clean bit. Let's try on here. Remember this bit here, we've got some paint schmutz in here. Let's sort that out, shall we? Okay, so basically just get the cocktail stick in there. Just gently get it in. And I'm going end on this time because of space, but I'm not putting really any pressure on at all. I don't want to scrape the plastic. I mean, I probably wouldn't. But I'm just very gently rubbing away the excess. And this is one reason why I find that the most fun Gunpla builds I ever do are ones where I don't really do any painting. Now, if you've seen my other videos, you know I do painting, I do weathering, I do things off camera like I did just then. Sorry. I do painting, I do weathering, all kinds of things. And I enjoy them, don't get me wrong. But the most fun I have is things like this, where I'm not having to think too much. I can be a little bit careless. I can take my time, but not as much as I would need to normally, because I know if I'm painting on bare plastic and I goof, I can just scrape it away. So you see here on the end of the rifle, if I can focus in on that, you've got this sort of stock here that comes out. I want to make that nice and straight, so I just simply scrub away. And if I go a bit too far, no problem, I'll just put some more paint on. How easy was that? That was just not hard at all. There's no reason not to do careful painting, but just be aware that if you use this technique, it is easily removed. Just because you're painting right on to bare plastic, and the paint doesn't want to be on the plastic. So yeah, the most fun I have sometimes is just these simple builds. I will, if I get a nice easy kit, like the Master Grade Full-On Unicorn, I'm not painting that. I'm just doing this kind of technique. A bit more advanced maybe, a little bit more, but just because I know I enjoy it more. So if I'm doing a serious build, then I'm doing a serious build and it's all hands on deck. But sometimes I want a palette cleanser, and all I'm going to do is something simple like this. So I think that just about covers all the bits I've painted. I shall now go away and get ready for the next part. Now the next part is things like these thrusters, we've painted them now, but they're just silver. We want to get some darkness in there. So the next thing we're going to do, you notice by the way I've panel lined, I forgot to mention I've done all the panel lining on the rest of the armour. I used the grey for the green parts. Panel line down there. That's intentional panel line, which is kind of cool. I didn't do the seam line because I want to try and hide that. Now what we want to do is try and get some panel lining into these parts, into like the verniers and thrusters and things like this, just to put some shadowing around this to give it some definition, to make it stand out. Can't really do that with the Gundam marker, because as soon as you get a Gundam marker in here now, as we've just seen, this paint will come off. So what we need to do is something completely different, which is what we call a pin wash. Now I'll show you this, I'll get everything ready in a second, we'll do the pin wash. Now you could do a pin wash for all the panel lining if you wanted to, but I'm going to show you how to do a pin wash, specifically a pin wash on bare plastic. I can't use my normal pin washing products, so we're going to get a special product. So let me get all this cleared away, the last few bits I need to tidy up, and then we'll do a pin wash. So, Giant Finger says back in a moment. Okay, right, so as promised, we're now going to do a pin wash on these rockety parts and various parts around the body. This is just, as I said, to bring some definition to these silver parts that we just painted. Otherwise they just look like flat silver. What are we going to use? I mentioned a special product. Well, the special product is ink. This is normal artist's ink. You can get it from any art shop. Now I can't remember what ink this is or what colour it is specifically. It's Winsor & Newton, I think I remember. I'm going to use two. I've got one which is almost black, and this one which is kind of a burnt umber brown colour. You can see it's like a kind of oil colour. I'm going to use this one for the rockets on the green parts, and I'm going to use the black one for anything on the dark grey parts. So we have some ink in this little container. I also need a smidge of water. The ink itself is quite thick, so I need a smidge of water, because it's going to be a very thin wash. Now you might be wondering why I'm using ink. Well, for this thing you could use thinned paints, but like I said before on I think this video or the other one, plastic on Bandai Gunpla is very sensitive to thinners, and if I was to use thinned paints it could damage the plastic. Also, if I use acrylic paint thinners on acrylic paints that haven't been protected with any kind of varnish or clear coat, you're just going to take the paint off. So I'm going to use these, which are basically just water, to thin them, so it's not going to affect this layer of paint. If these were protected with a gloss coat or something like that, I could use then any other paint, any other thinned paint. But let's give this a go. So how are we going to do this? Dead simple. Quite simply, get your thinned ink and just simply touch it in like that. Just touch, you're not brushing it, you're just touching it. I'm going to put it into the little recess here, down the side. Now because it's a kind of oily brown colour, I think it's a sort of umber or sepia tint, I'm not sure. I can't remember, I mean I've had these inks for so many years, I can't even begin to tell you what colour this actually would be. But they're just standard artist's inks. You thin them with waters if you need to. Various model companies do similar things, various model paint companies. A lot of companies that make paints for tabletop gaming, like, you know, your Warhammer and stuff, Games Workshop, the Citadel stuff, they use some inks as well. And now we just leave that to dry. Now you need to be conscious of which way up you leave this, because if I tip this up it's going to run out. But because this is mostly thin, it's very thin now with the water, it's just going to flow into the recesses and collect. It's not going to stain much more than the bits I've actually painted. So I need to rest that somewhere, it's not going to fall over, that'll do. Let's try another bit, let's find another bit of armour. Armour. Now I could use the black here, but I think the same way I use the grey Gundam marker, black's a bit harsh, so I'm using this brown one. Just going to put that into there. And it's really doing what we're doing with the Gundam markers in a way. And you could just, instead of using Gundam markers at all, use this technique. See how it's gathered around that part there? You could just use this technique exclusively and it'd be absolutely fine. to rest that on something to keep it horizontal. But Gundam markers are quick and easy, and for the sake of this beginner build, I'd just say stick with the Gundam markers. I'd also say don't knock your camera. Let's give this one a go. Get around the outside, get it in shot as well. Hopefully this is in focus for you. I have to set the focus on my camera, so if I move away from where the focal point is, it goes horribly wrong. So apologies. Now the other thing you'll see this doing as well, hopefully, is remember how I said it didn't matter too much if you had slightly lumpy edges to things. This will collect around the edges, and it will just either block out or smudge the edges, so that if you've got a bit of paint where the edge of the paint's like that, it's just going to blend that a bit so you won't see it quite as much. It'll look awesome, trust me. One of these, and this couldn't be simpler. So see how that's a bit rough around the edges? Get some of this going in. Now the ink by itself, if you just put it in neat, it'll be darker, but it won't flow quite as well. Won't flow quite as readily around edges. So do be aware of that. Now what we'll do for the owl banging the camera, for some of the black parts, I'll just get some of the darker ink. Okay, so you can see now this ink is a much darker ink. I don't think it's actually straight up India ink. Now what I can do here is just run this, touch this to the edges of these rings. Now you remember how I said I hadn't got paint all around the edges and sides of these? That's fine, because that's what this is doing. It's collecting around the edges, and it'll just blend that a little bit, so it won't look like a silver top with an unpainted plastic side. Go in the middles again. Now the middle's actually Gundam marked and they came out alright, so that's not too bad. That's that done. So it just puts a bit of dark shade. Now you might find once these dry, they fade a little bit and become less obvious. You might have to go around and do it again. Put that there. What do we want now? Let's have a go at some of the thrusters on the feet. I'm just going to tip this thing. Tip my little paint pot because all the paint's thinning out, all the ink. Okay, so these ones will do the same again. We'll just go into the thrusters first of all. Just to bring out those little ridges inside. It just brings a little bit of life back to it. Remember, these are rocket boosters, so they're going to be kind of grubby, and they're also on the floor. You can just brush it in if you want, and it will then just move away from the raised areas and into the recesses. Now I kind of have to do this flat, so I don't know if you can see it. I'm kind of having to do it a bit flat. And the thinner you have this stuff, the fainter it will be. Now I did go around these with, and I keep knocking the camera, so I do apologise, it's so close to where I'm painting, it's hard not to. I did go around these little boosters with the Gundam marker, but they have a bit more life in there. And that's it. Now, like I say, if this was a painted model, and you had a gloss varnish on top, you could use thinned acrylic paints, you could use thinned enamel paints, or my personal favourite, you could use thinned oil paints. But for the purpose of this build, because I haven't got anything on the plastic, it's bare plastic, I can't use anything that's going to have hot thinners in it, so I can't use acrylic thinners or enamel thinners or oil paint thinners. Probably won't do any damage, but it can weaken the plastic. And that's why you've got to be super careful. The paint on its own, like these silver paints I've added, it's not going to do any harm. You'll be absolutely fine. If I was sloshing thinners around, yeah, that's why I went for the Gundam markers. So I'm going to go off and do the rest of these parts. Get all these little pin washes in. You can see there how this is coming out now. It's had a few moments to dry. Probably take about 15-20 minutes to thoroughly dry, maybe half an hour. I may go around with the second coat. I may go around with some black on the outside of that thruster and leave the brown on the inside. You can mix and match. Some black on the outside there might look quite good. and keep the brown on the inside. And when this is dried, we are then ready for the assembly. And then once the assembly is done, we're going to do a little bit of dry brushing, just a little bit, after we've done the matte varnish. It's going to be assembly, then matte varnish, and then some dry brushing. And then I think we're about done. I might... See, it's difficult for me because there's a lot of things I want to do and I don't want to get too involved in this because it's supposed to be an easy build. I might show some pastel work. And if I do that, it's the kind of work you can do with either the Tamiya pastels I use, or you can go and get some simple artist pastels and do the same things. I might show. We'll see how it goes, just to get dust and dirt effects. But that's going to do it for this time. Thank you so much for watching. Your continued viewing of my nonsense makes me very, very happy. It does. It does. Because I do this for you guys, and the fact people come to me and say, look what I've built, this is what I've learnt from your videos. I love that. That's what I do this for. I don't do it for the money, although my videos are monetized. I don't make much. I do this because I like to share. And I may know, I'm not an expert, I'm not a professional, I'm not a master, and I never say that the way to do things is the way I do things. The way to do things is take ideas from me, try my methods, and then see if you can find a better way. So, take care of yourselves, go off and make things, whether you're a beginner or you've been doing it for years, go make some stuff. If you want to send me pictures of your stuff or how your first ever Gunpla or your first ever model's going, send it. Everything's brilliant. I'll show it off on the front page. But yeah, visit me on Facebook, facebook.com/modelmakingguru. I am on the Twitters, @modelmakingguru. And of course there's the website, modelmakingguru.com, which I shamefully haven't updated in about 6 or 7 months. It's woefully out of date, but I'm so pressed for time. But that'll do. Take care of yourselves. We'll speak soon. Have fun. Go build stuff. And as always, adios amoebas.